Welcome everyone to this masterclass in marketing. My name is Professor Caleb Say, and I'm an assistant professor of marketing at NBS. Today, I'll be giving you an online seminar on brand equity and personal branding. What am I going to cover in this agenda today? I'll be focusing on two major questions. The first one is, what is brand equity and why do brands seek to build it? Secondly, I'll be focusing on what is personal branding and how it can help you achieve your goals. While there's many definitions of brand equity that you can find in the marketplace and in industry and also in the literature, I'll be using what's called customer-based brand equity. This is by Keller and Swaminathan in 2019. And they define it based on the perspective of the consumer, the customer. That's why it's called customer-based brand equity. Now, a couple of questions that they do focus on with this definition is, how do you build a strong brand? And what are the core components of brand equity? Now, defining customer-based brand equity is what we have to do first. Again, like I mentioned, it approaches defining brand equity from the perspective of the consumer. Now, it stresses that the power of a brand lies in the hearts and minds of customers, right? There's basically the differential effect that the brand knowledge has on consumer response given the marketing of the brand. So what does that mean? That means with brand equity, without any knowledge of the brand, you are at zero brand equity. But as you start to increase brand awareness and brand associations, you're starting to have positive brand equity. On the flip side, what that also means is if you don't control the associations, the image of your brand, you're starting to build up what's called negative brand equity. Okay, so let's take the example of Netflix. I'm sure everybody watching now is very familiar with Netflix, being maybe a consumer yourself or having at least watched it before. Now, the story of Netflix goes back all the way to the late 1990s, where they had this disruptive business model to try to cut out the physical stores of DVD rentals. Now, what they did was they posted their collection of movies and shows online, where consumers can go online to rent the DVDs, and Netflix would send them through mail the DVDs. And then when consumers are done with that, they would send it back, right? And effectively what this does is it cuts out the use of any type of physical store. Now, flash forward about 25 years later, Netflix now is a powerful brand which invests so much into content creation, which is not just a rental DVD place anymore. It's a streaming giant, plus it's a producer of entertainment all around the world, right? In the last couple of years, they spent more than $500 million investing in Asian content. If you can think about Squid Game and so forth, right? All of this is to build up the brand equity, the awareness and the associations that you would have of Netflix. So how do you start a strong brand, right? A brand like Netflix? Well, it starts with the idea of brand knowledge. Now, it's important for marketers to use models to understand how is brand knowledge formed, and we can use this based on memory models. So a simple memory model is called the associative network memory model that marketers like to use. Now, what is this memory model? It's a visual representation that memory operates like a network, right? Where you have nodes and you have connecting links. So nodes represent the information stored as concepts, where you have links representing the strength of the association between those nodes. So it's useful to think and use this model to think about how brand knowledge actually looks like inside the minds of consumers. Okay, so let's take another example of a strong brand. You can see here, Apple. I'm sure everybody here is, of course, very aware and knowledgeable of Apple itself. Now, how would you map out how Apple would look like in the mind of consumers? For example, if you look at the Apple logo here, that's representing the middle, and you have different nodes all around the Apple logo, right? And these are basically associations. And so basically what Apple looks like in the mind of consumers is you would think when they think of the word Apple and the logo Apple, they would think stylish, cool, elegant, Steve Jobs, iTunes, iPhone, and so forth and so on, right? Each of these nodes represent stored information about the Apple brand. Now, Apple's job here basically is to kind of try to reinforce and strengthen positive associations about the Apple brand. For example, it's stylish, it's cool, it's worth it, right? And at the same time, try to negate the negative associations, for example, that it's pricey or it's not worth it, right? And that would be Apple's core positioning to try to increase its image. Another example here. Why did Apple open up this very elegant store inside MBS, Marina Bay Sands? Right? If you look at the strategy of this Apple store, it doesn't only represent a retail strategy, which is in order to sell more iPhones or any kind of Apple products. In fact, I would argue that this strategy is more about brand building than it is about the retail strategy, right? If you think about Apple Store here, the design of it, the look of it, the location, it's all to attract more eyeballs. It's all to attract tourists coming through Singapore, going to the most expensive retail location in Singapore to look at this powerful brand that Apple has built. And when they see the store, they would be wowed, figuring out that Apple has deep pockets. It has the money, the power to create products that are innovative, stylish, and so on and so forth and so on, right? And so this is an example from Apple's retail strategy of how a brand builds in order to increase brand equity. Now, let's take a deep dive into the sources of brand equity. Now, as you recall, brand equity is the differential effect of brand knowledge. So what are the components of brand knowledge? You have two. You have brand awareness and you have brand image. So let's go by brand awareness first. What is brand awareness? So brand awareness consists of two things. You have brand recognition and you have brand recall. Brand recognition is consumers' ability to confirm prior exposure to the brand when given the brand as a cue. Brand recall, on the other hand, is consumers' ability to retrieve the brand from memory when given either the product or service category, the needs fulfilled by the category, or a purchase and usage situation as a cue. Now, the question is, which one of these are more important? Of course, the answer is both of them are as important, right? And they actually, in fact, build on each other. So when is brand recognition important? Brand recognition is important at the point of purchase because when given many different options, you as the marketer or the brand want the consumer to be able to recognize your brand and to choose your brand over all the competitors. When is brand recall important? Well, brand recall is important when you're not at the point of purchase and you want consumers to think about your brand when they have a certain need that comes up, right? Now, it's much easier to build brand recognition than brand recall because it's easy to see things for the first time, recognize it on occasion after multiple times, but in order to recall things later on, it takes much more repeated exposure. Okay, so let me give you an example. I'm sure many of you here have studied Chinese before, growing up in Singapore, correct? From your memory, what is the most difficult Chinese character that you know? I'll give you a second to think about that. You're trying to recall the most difficult Chinese character. Well, there is debate on this, but many people say this is the hardest Chinese character, right? In terms of the number of strokes. Apparently, there are 57 strokes in this one character. It's biang biang mian, right? It's a type of noodle from Shaanxi province in China. And you can find it in Singapore, in food courts and whatnot here. Now, if I take that away, how many of you would be able to recognize that character going forward? Probably some of you, right? Because I've shown you only for about 10 seconds. But how many people would be able to recall how to write that character right now? Probably very few. And the point is, with repeated exposure, you can increase recognition, eventually recall, but it takes much harder to actually increase recall over time. And that's what brands are trying to do with repeated exposure. All right, so what are the advantages of building brand awareness? There are multiple advantages. So to the extent that you can build strong brand awareness and high brand awareness, you have learning advantages. What that means is it's much easier for a consumer to want to learn more about you when they learn about your brand, right? When they're aware of your brand. Secondly, consideration advantages. The fact is you're trying to narrow the set of choices and consideration sets that consumers have when there's many choices they can make, correct? And so the fact is As you increase brand awareness, you're increasing your advantages of consideration. Lastly, choice advantages. When consumers have the motivation, the ability, and the opportunity to purchase your brand, high brand awareness increases all three of these. So as a result of this, by increasing brand awareness as a whole, you're increasing the likelihood of consumers to buy your brand and to continue to buy your brand going forward. So how do we create brand awareness? I kind of already alluded to this point earlier. In fact, if you look at any type of marketing activity that companies do, right, in order to communicate some element of the brand elements, meaning it could be the slogan, the symbol, the name, the logo, the character, the packaging, social media, word of mouth, sponsorship, event marketing, all of these are ways in which a brand can communicate its brand to consumers and increase awareness, correct? And as a whole, just as I mentioned before, repetition is what actually increases recognizability. So as any marketer would know, you can't just run one campaign and expect to have results that last forever, correct? You have to continue to invest, continue to have repeated campaigns and do repeated marketing because repetition increases recognition. So let's do a little bit of a thought experiment here. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of product categories, and I want you to think about what's the first brand that pops up into mind. I'm pretty sure I can guess all three of them correctly. First one, name a hot pot restaurant. Heidi Lau. Did I get it correct? 2, name a shop to buy bakwa. Peach and Hang. Did I get it correct? Thirdly, name a brand of salted egg fish skin snack. Irvin's. Did I get it correct? Why did I probably get those correct? If you think about these three brands and how they operate in Singapore, with their different stories and their brand histories, their retail strategy, their marketing, likely you've tried and experienced all three of these brands in multiple settings before. Whether you like it or not, these brands have become super recallable by you guys. And so this is the example of how brands can invest in their marketing activities in order to increase brand recall and, of course, brand awareness. So now that we've talked about brand awareness, let's move on to talk about the second component of brand knowledge, which is brand image. Now, once you've reached a sufficient level of brand awareness, marketers then try to create and craft a brand image that's positive. Now, how do you get a positive brand image? It's all the actions linked to creating strong, favorable, and unique associations of the brand and store that inside the memory of consumers. So these brand associations, is what we call them, can be either brand attributes or benefits. So there's three components and characteristics of associations. First of all, the strength of brand associations. Now, the more deeply a person thinks about product information and relates it to the existing brand knowledge, the stronger the resulting brand association will be formed. Secondly, favorability of brand associations. This is higher when a brand possesses relevant attributes and benefits that satisfy consumer needs and wants. Thirdly, uniqueness of brand associations. Right? All brands are trying to have a unique selling proposition of the product, and to that extent, you can create a sustainable competitive advantage by having unique brand associations. Now, again, a couple of examples to illustrate this. The first ad you see here is an ad by a Russian brand of gum called Darrow. Now, if you see this ad, what is the ad message here? What is the association that's being shown in this ad? As you can see, the product itself, the gum, is on the propellers of this gum package, making it look like a fan. What is that a symbolism of? It's a symbol of, in fact, that the gum itself is a fan that cools, right? And so again, the association here is showing that this is a cooling gum. Okay, second example. You can see here in this ad a brand for hair supplement brand called Perrin. Now, what do you see in this ad? You see a picture of a muscular portrait right? And what they're trying to say here is that, in fact, the hair supplement makes your hair as strong as muscle fibers on the body. So you can see the connection and the association they're trying to build is that this hair supplement will make your hair as strong as muscle fibers. Thirdly, this is an ad by Olay, which is a face cream brand. And you can see the big picture here is a zoom in of the cap of the branded product. It's a face cream, right? What's special about this ad is when you look at it, you probably don't know what's going on. What's the deeper association being built here? It's actually two layers of the story. First of all, you will notice that the cap, the black thing you see here, represents what looks like an iron. The iron, in fact, represents what? It represents the fact that when do you use an iron? You use an iron to iron out clothing. And why do you need to iron out clothing? It's when it has wrinkles. So using this iron here, this analogy is that this product makes you iron out the wrinkles on your face. So it's two layers of an association here. But with that understanding, you can see that they're trying to create this association that this Olay face cream is as good as an iron for your face that takes away all the wrinkles of your face. Okay, so just to summarize here, we've talked about brand equity being made of two components of brand knowledge, right, which is brand awareness and brand image. And you can map it out on a matrix like this. On the one dimension of the matrix, you have brand awareness, which could be high and low. And you also have brand image, which can be negative and positive, right? And of course, this is a conceptual way to visualize what is brand equity. Now, where do you want to be on this matrix? Of course, the most ideal spot is to have high brand awareness and positive brand equity, right? So high and positive brand image. That would equate high and positive brand equity. The worst place to be on this matrix would, of course, be high brand awareness, but at the same time, negative brand image, right? And that would give you high and negative brand equity. Of course, what that would mean was many people know about your brand, but they think poorly about your brand. Now, in this case, what do? Right? What you're doing as a marketer is probably to try to negate some of these negative associations to increase the positivity of your image and at the same time increase awareness about the good aspects of your brand. So with this kind of strategy, this kind of matrix, all brands are trying to achieve what is called high and positive brand equity. Now, why do they want to do that? It's because there's a strong correlation between brand equity and brand value. Brand value meaning the actual financial performance and how much a brand is actually worth on the marketplace. So there is a direct correlation and linkage between brand equity and brand value. Okay, so let me just summarize this first part of the seminar. Brands seek to build high and positive brand equity through marketing actions that increase brand awareness, such as recognition and recall, and also to facilitate strong, favorable, and unique associations about the brand. Now, to the extent that a brand can do this over time, you have a strong brand with high brand value. Okay, now let's move on to the second part of the seminar. What is personal branding and how can it help you to achieve your goals? So a key question to start off this discussion here is, what is your brand? So I want you to think about that for a second. What is your brand? Now, how do we define personal branding? There's many ways to define it. Here is one of the more strategic ways to define it. The effort of individuals or entrepreneurs to differentiate themselves and to stand out from a crowd by identifying and articulating their unique value proposition, whether professional or personal, and then to leverage it across platforms with a consistent message and image to achieve a specific goal. I know that's a mouthful. A more simplified way to define what is personal branding is, how does an audience perceive you? Or even more than that, what is your unique promise of value? Now, you might be thinking, why should I brand myself? How's that relevant? Well, two adages here are important. First of all, everyone has the power to brand themselves or to be their own brand. And in fact, it is your main job to be your own marketer, right? Now, why is that? It's because If you do not brand yourself, other people will. So whether it's word of mouth, whether it's reputation and whatnot, it's your prerogative to try to control the narrative about yourself. Now, personal brand equity is taking the concepts of what we just talked about earlier in the seminar. What is brand equity? As you recall, brand equity is brand knowledge composed of awareness and of image. Now, the same concepts can be brought here when we're talking about personal brand equity, right? That's basically who knows you, what people know about you, and what people think and feel about you. And of course, these things are dependent on many things, such as your personal characteristics, your credentials, your history, your experience, your training, your portfolio, your values, interests, passions, even your relationships, your networks, your affiliations, your memberships. All of these things define who you are. Now, of course, we live in a digital age, so it's very easy to Google someone and to find out much information about them. The question to ask yourself is, what do people see when they Google you? What kind of digital footprints have you left online? Whether that is your Facebook, your Instagram, your LinkedIn profile, maybe some articles that you've written in the past, right? Out of all those things, ask yourself, can people form a strong, memorable, and unique impression about you? And do they see value ultimately? Now let's take a step back here. When would you use personal branding? You would use personal branding when you have an objective and you have an audience and you have a message to be said. So ask yourself, what is your objective? Who is your audience? And what is the message you're trying to send? A couple of examples here. Let's imagine that you want to be an entrepreneur, starting up a new mobile app selling a certain product, right? Your objective, of course, is to communicate a message that your brand and your company sells the best product, right? Who is your audience? You're selling it to consumers and to investors who want to invest in your brand, right? Another example, say you are an aspiring YouTube content creator. You want to start up a new channel and you want to gain more and more followers. Well, again, what's your objective, right? What is unique about your YouTube channel? Who do you want to reach to? And what kind of message are you sending, right? What's the value in your channel as opposed to the millions of other channels out there, right? So with these kind of objective setting, you can start to look and apply the principles of personal branding. So in terms of promise of value, you're not only trying to showcase your skills and your experience, but what value do you bring, right, to your audience or to whatever objectives you have. So let me read an example of a personal branding statement. For a prospective employer, I am the best candidate for the marketing analytics position because I have the right credentials as an MBS graduate with a business analytics specialization, the necessary experience having interned as a data analyst at Shopee, and I am a strong leader who has the ability to persevere, as evidenced by my background as a member of the basketball team at NTU. Right? Of course, this is just an example here, but showcasing that this prospective candidate has the experience, the credentials, and the strong soft skills, leadership skills in order to get that position. Now, what's he doing with the statement? He's showcasing the value that this potential candidate has over any other existing candidates by emphasizing credentials, experience, strong leadership skills, right? So overall, you get a package of value here. Now, a useful framework to think about and to utilize when you're thinking about personal branding, right? It's called the 3 C's. First C is clarity. Being clear and authentic about who you are and also who you are not is very crucial, right? You don't want to act as if you're someone that you're not. You want to stay true to yourself. So this is your promise of your unique value. Consistency, the second C. Communicating a consistent message is important to build your personal brand, and how can it be easily understandable and recognizable as well. Thirdly, constancy, right? Obviously building a brand, just like corporations building their brands takes a long time, right? So maintaining a personal brand would take your prolonged efforts so that it becomes memorable. Okay, so this brings us to the end of the seminar. So let me just summarize. Building a strong brand is crucial not only for companies to achieve commercial success, but for individuals who seek to fulfill a personal, career, and societal objective. Companies and individuals can apply and leverage the concepts of brand equity in brand building. Now, lastly, NBS is a great place for you to start your brand building journey. Now, I'd like to take some questions, and you can submit those through Slido. Okay, so here comes the first question. How do you measure brand equity? Well, it's a very common question, and in fact, there's many ways to measure brand equity. So one way, of course, is using qualitative methods. You can do in-depth interviews, you can do focus groups with target consumers to really understand what people know and think about your brand. Of course, qualitatively, you can do brand awareness surveys, for example. You can measure recognition, recall, questions like, what brand comes to mind when you think about toothpaste, for example, or any other product category? You can measure image perceptions and so forth and associations by asking questions like, what do people think about when they hear about your brand? Another way would be to look at, for example, online consumer traffic, right? Everything now is done online, everything is digital, right? And so Google Analytics provides a lot of useful data about search data, click-throughs, page views, and link that to consumer demographics so you can really try to understand who is looking at your brand and what they know about your brand, right? Another one would be social listening. So this is popular in terms of looking at and tracking social media trends, right? What is being said about your brand on social media platforms. For example, you can have things like mentions or sentiment scores, net promoter scores, and so forth. So these are all different ways that brands can use in order to measure and track their brand equity. Okay, so here's a second question. What do employers look for the most, from my opinion? Well, of course, the necessary credentials and experience and hard skills are, of course, going to set the bar. But beyond that, I think what's important is probably three things. Genuine passion, right? Showing the authentic passion towards something, right? Whether it's the job or some kind of interest that you might have related to the job. And it's hard to fake being passionate about something, right? When you talk to someone who is passionate and excited about something, you can see that excitement come out. So that's one thing, genuine passion. Secondly, I think maybe courage is important, right? In this day and age, people are scared to say and speak their minds for fear of being judged and whatnot, especially in a corporate setting and whatnot. But I think having a certain level of courage to speak your mind, right, when it's in line with your values, that's something that people actually respect. Maybe a third one would be resiliency. When the going gets tough, many people quit, right? I think employers are looking for people who would be willing to stick it through, right? When things are tough, they don't just leave and they quit, right? They want to stick it out, and that actually shows a lot of their character. So I think passion, resiliency, and courage are important parts of what employers are looking for these days. Okay, I think that's it. And we don't have time for any more questions, but you can ask me questions offline as well. So thank you for paying attention to this seminar.